Good Friday morning, everyone. It is Friday. It is July 25th. I am Jamie Steyer Johnson alongside Brittany Carper back on our regularly scheduled Friday programming. Yeah, we caught up for a little bit longer than usual before we started recording, and I've just recalled that it's because we haven't talked in what feels like forever since an early episode last week. But we have gotten a lot to talk about since, where you get through obviously All-Star weekend and then get back playing again. And of course, that means that you're hitting the ground running, had 5 games right off the bat earlier this week, and still going pretty strong. Had 3 matchups last night on Thursday, 3 more tonight, and then a jam-packed weekend slate. And I don't know. It isn't necessarily completely different from past years, but it feels like about as much as we have seen in quite a while. This playoff race, this point of the season, like things are pretty wide open. We've got a heck of a kind of log jam here in the middle where you have the Atlanta Dream sitting at 14-10. You have the Los Angeles Sparks sitting at 10-14. And then you have 4 teams in between them. And so you've got kind of this 10-team race about for a playoff spot. And there's not a lot of separation in there. It's games really matter. Everything's really consequential still. And that's really exciting, I think, for being past the midpoint of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at, the Sparks, so they've won 4 in a row and they're starting to, I think, play their best basketball of the year right now. And so when you look at them on that last spot, kind of chasing the teams in front of them with a 4-game separation, you're going to see a lot of games really start to matter in terms of matchups and who they're playing. But I really am intrigued by what we're going to see down the stretch here from these teams, because I think like the Sparks are definitely, if you're giving them the up arrow or the down arrow, they're getting the up arrow. I think Mystics, Aces are right in that maybe equal to maybe a down arrow kind of. And then Fever are just hard right now because they're playing well. Obviously, Kelsey Mitchell is just playing really great, kind of carrying that team with Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard. And then, they're getting the contributions from Mary McDonald, Cunningham Hole. But, with Caitlin, they're just different. And once she's back, it's the integration again. And so maybe some up and down there. And the Dream, they dropped the first game, after the break. Then they beat the Mercury on the road, still without Ryan Howard. So again, they're kind of a tough team. And then Storm, same thing. They drop the game, then they go and they play. They beat a Sky team last night, which was extremely shorthanded. And they beat them convincingly. But really, when you watch like the first half, you're not overly impressed by what they did. I thought that second quarter was just really hard to watch. It was 13-8. So many, missed opportunities. Now I know Skylar Diggins was back, but so I don't know where they're trending. They are the team for me this year that has just been all over the map, the Storm. I feel like we talk about them. We're like, yeah, they're right there. They're going to, and you look, they're 15-10, but they just have some games where you scratch your head and you think, did they really just play that way? So that's what's going to be interesting to me.
Yeah, it's hard too because, as we said, there's a lot of teams with a very similar record, and there's a lot of teams that are just showing a lack of consistency, and some of them it is related to injuries. A lot of them it's related to injuries. You've had Phoenix with really consequential injuries, having people in and out of the lineup. Atlanta, I mean, obviously having Ryan Howard out is a big impact. Caitlin Clark being out for the Fever might have something to do with some of their struggles, especially going in and out of the lineup, as you said. That is really, really tough to adjust. And that's why I think we see a lot of teams trying to ensure that players are as close to completely ready. Like for New York, they completely shot Jonquel Jones down after she was injured, came back and re-injured it, and then was back out again. And they just said, all right, after the All-Star break, we'll get you back in there. But I think that there's also levels that are not related to injury and just related to a level of parity in the league for sure. And also just different schemes, different game plans, and just I really do think it comes back a lot to the level of parity where you have a lot of teams that can compete with each other. And so, I posted the other night when Atlanta was beating Phoenix, they have so many weapons. They have so many ways they can run their offense. And it was making Phoenix look really undisciplined. And this is a Phoenix team that has been pretty solid defensively. They've had to play really great team basketball. That's something they've developed in a big way, especially with some of their stars out. And then you have an Atlanta team where you can really pound it inside, or you can spread five out. Even with Brittany Griner on the floor, they're spreading five out, and then they're getting these terrific dives from Brianna Jones. The touch she has around the rim,
Mhm.
absurd. It's always funny because my husband and I talk about this all the time. Every time I look at like Bree Jones' stats and I see her little bio and I see that it says 6'3", I'm like, that just can't be true. Like, I always think of Bree Jones as like a 6'5", 6'6" big because she just finishes everything. She's so
Mhm.
strong. But anyway, I digress. You know me. I'm gonna get on a post related tangent. But
Yeah.
the dream just they have so many weapons. And I feel like that's kind of common across the league where there's not really teams that have one single way that they have to play. Teams have diversified their options a lot. And so there's going to be matchups that are good. There's going to be matchups that aren't as good. And especially if, okay, well, this is our player that has the mismatch. If they have an off night, you're going to see a potentially uncharacteristic looking game. And so it just means that it's really hard to figure out a lot of these teams. And it's not going to get a whole lot easier because we still have injuries in play. We're going to continue to see different people come back or go back out. You have Emma Meesman joining the Liberty. You have, Cameron Brink is supposed to be back in the lineup here for Los Angeles soon. Like, you've got Ileana Ruper joining the Valkyries. You just have all these really big kind of paradigm shifts that are coming here halfway through in a season where we already didn't really know what to make of a lot of these teams. And so just like, well, I guess we better watch all the games.
Yeah, and that's great from a viewer standpoint, is like when you have so many teams that are in the mix right there fighting for playoff spots, that's what you want as a league. You want that parity, you want exciting games that are going to attract viewers. And I think this season more than ever you're seeing that, and the product of being able to play through injuries, teams still being able to find ways to win games, and then when you're getting those players back, you know how to win games without them. Now it's about, okay, we're integrated back, we're at full strength. This is what we're going to look like. And then the tweaks. And that's what you kind of alluded to when you touched on being able to play different ways. I think you're really seeing the league develop, and I think some of it is an influx of new coaching too. So
Mhm.
you're seeing a little bit more of a shift in kind of coaching and how things and the game has evolved to allow different teams to play different ways and different styles depending on matchups or the players they have available. And that's a testament, I think, to again how much the league has grown and just how the game has evolved, because you're being able to, it's not just one way anymore. It can be from the 3-point line, it can be from the inside, and it's kind of that fine balance that, I think as a viewer and a fan of the game has made the league really continue to, jump and excite people, because you're having all those different matchups and teams that night in and night out can be competitive. And when you have, six teams fighting for those, last kind of playoff spots, that's going to keep the eyes engaged till the very end. And so, what a great thing for the league.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Especially when coming into the season, it kind of seemed like, okay, we have some teams that it's just going to be kind of a get through it sort of year, and a lot of them have been, I think, surprising in a lot of ways. And so Certainly been really, really fun to watch. We have some of that here tonight with the matchups we have, and all extremely consequential as far as playoff standings. And I think that games that are lined up to be very competitive as well, where you have Mercury visiting the Liberty, you have the Aces visiting the Lynx, and you have the Wings visiting the Valkyries. And so, really a terrific slate here tonight. Naturally, you have two of them at the same time, and then the other one 2.5 hours later. But I guess two at the same time is light work compared to some of what we've seen this year. So whatever, I'll take it. At least 6:30 Central is not three of them at 9 o'clock Central when I'm sitting there fighting to keep my eyes open, let alone watch three games at the same time. So let's
Yes.
start with the Phoenix Liberty game. I I think that one of the big things here is if you want to get wins on the Liberty, better get them now, because I'm not saying they're going undefeated once Emma Meesman reports. That's not at all what I'm saying, but they're going to get harder to beat, and they're already pretty hard to beat. Their versatility, their length, the size is going to be crazy. So especially in situations where you just don't have a lot of size on the interior to begin with, such as for Phoenix. I think that is going to make that an even tougher matchup going forward. And then, of course, when you're in the top of the playoff race, getting wins over other teams around you is going to be really important. So, certainly a lot at stake here. And for a Phoenix team where, as we said, they're still, figuring out their new identity. They've had a lot of identities this year, and some of them have been really, really impressive. But now getting back to their full strength, I think people are expecting that to be seamless. And well, you're adding these great players, so of course you're just going to get better. And that's simply not the way it works. They're still figuring out everyone's individual roles. Not having Monica Komakani definitely hurt some out there, just the way that she's able to handle the ball, provide a pressure release, shoot. She
Mhm.
does a lot of little things, I think, that fly under the radar. And so I think this will be a really big one to see, okay, are they able to make it a really competitive game, or are they just at a point where they don't have it quite together yet? And if that's the case, a team like the Liberty would be in a position to exploit that and just make it kind of ugly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's going to be the key is, again, what are Copper and Sabli's minutes look like? With those two and Alyssa Thomas, I think, I'd have to go back and look actual, but the amount of games they've all three played together is very few this season
Mhm.
at full strength and healthy. And so, that's going to take some time for those three to, obviously gel. And then what does the role players role look like now, because a lot of them had stepped up, were in roles where they were counted on, they were dependent, but when you're not necessarily getting the same amount of opportunities and shots, are you still finding the rhythm within the game? And I think the other night after their loss against the Dream, they touched on that a little bit. Like, it is hard. You are still trying to figure that out. And I think that will be the thing for them, is just how quickly at full strength, can they adapt and really start to play well together. But like you said, now's the time to take an advantage of the New York Liberty. And so, if you come out of that game, a 10, 15 point loss, or, now you're kind of scratching your head like, man, what do we need to do? Because they're only going to get better. Their reinforcements are coming, but they're going to have some learning curve too,
Mhm.
adding her into, Meesman into the mix. And so that's going to be interesting for the Liberty too. I think, what's that going to look like with their lineups? I think, Coach Williams and Chelsea talked about that yesterday a little bit in their podcast. Just, it is different when you get different players in. Like, is she going to be off the bench? What's that look like? Because then again, the roles on the Liberty are then changing too from what they've been. So I really think that's going to be a good game. I'm excited to again see what the Mercury look like as they're at full strength, because certainly they've exceeded expectations up to this point, and I'm really intrigued to kind of see what that looks like going forward.
And additionally, as we talked about, these season series are going to be really important. And I talked about, if you're going to get wins in the Liberty, you got to get them now. Well, actually, the best time to get them was yesterday, to already have the wins. And so
Yes.
for teams like Minnesota that haven't played them yet, not an option. However, there's some other teams that are in the race right up there that have stacked up some of those wins. And so
Mhm.
you have both Phoenix and Seattle that are 2-0 against the Liberty right now. And so
Mhm.
that definitely is really impactful down the stretch. And then you have Atlanta that's 1-1 already. So you definitely have these teams that are right around New York that have put in some early work to put themselves in a good position. But you obviously can't settle with that. We still have a number of games ahead of us that are going to matter, but they they definitely can look at those wins and say, well, at the very least, we did our work early when we weren't at full strength, and we've put ourselves in a good position where even if we stumble, we aren't totally, out of anything. So that definitely is, I think, going to be really impactful going forward. The imbalanced scheduling, again, just kind of one of those funky things. But
Mhm.
as far as some of the beneficiaries or not so much beneficiaries of that, the Lynx here tonight, seeing the Aces, second night of a back to back for the Aces. We've talked about the Aces a lot, and our mantra has kind of been there's a lot of questions, there's not a lot of answers. And I just don't think the answers are there. They've they've made moves, they've made some changes, but end of the day, this isn't the Aces team of years past. And that's, I mean, in the most literal sense as well as, figurative, because you do not have Kelsey Plum, some of your primary bench reinforcements that you've had available are no longer there. I mean, you had Tiffany Mitchell that you had to cut in order to make some of these other moves. Um, Ended up having Tiffany Hayes go elsewhere. So, I mean, we've gone over that part. They've had times where they look very solid because they're the Aces and they're fully capable of that,
Mhm.
but they just have not found any level of consistency. And at this point, I don't know that that is something I would anticipate. It's just very up and down, and so it's gonna be really interesting, especially on a back to back like this, where you have a tough loss to Indiana, and then you're going up to Minnesota, a team that hasn't lost at home yet this year, but a team that has, I think, some mismatches in that they don't really have a true center to guard like Asia, obviously.
Mhm.
They're gonna have some significant mismatches there. And then I think even Megan Gustafson is a really good, strong interior presence that she's going to have a little bit of size on quite a few of the post players that she may see in some of the reserves for Minnesota. I'm very curious to see how Las Vegas responds to a tough one last night and having to go back to back, especially when you have starters that play quite substantial minutes. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing when I watch the Aces, they have spurts where they're good, the ball moves, they're finding the easy looks, the easy, catch and shoots, but when you watch that second half, I thought the big difference in that game with the Fever is just their pace, their ball movement. They were creating shots, and the Aces, on the other hand, just weren't. It's a lot of dribbling, it's, a lot of one on one, and that becomes also really hard to do. And then now you're playing a lot of minutes, and then now you're going to go play a back to back. But I think the biggest thing, the Aces, they just don't consistently shoot the three ball well
Yep.
enough. I mean, they were 2 of 15 last night, but their also percentage just even from 2 is not great. And so
Mhm.
when you just struggle to make shots, but also just consistently shoot from the 3-point line, that is just something that is so hard to overcome. Because if you're not shooting at a very high rate from the two, and you're not a great 3-point shooting team, where do those points come from on a consistent basis? And that to me has been the Achilles heel to that team all year, is just the inconsistent scoring. And it's not just from the 3-point line, it's also the 2-point line. I mean, they are bottom of the league in 2-point field goal percentage. And that to me is just, it's so hard to overcome on a nightly basis in a league as good as the W. And so even if you have all these players that are, really good, and they've been there and they've won championships, it's just that inconsistent scoring to me that has just kind of been the real crux of the problem for them.
Yeah, it's kind of wild just because I mean we've seen again a lot of these same players be successful in this scheme and others. And I saw Nikias Duncan, who friend of her hoop stats, has taken place in our mock off season exercises and such. But he's just one who he gets into the numbers. He's great with that, and he was talking about how, well, has talked all season about the rate of shooting the three for Las Vegas, and especially in some of their tougher stretches, they just do not shoot very many threes. And part of that is when you're not shooting it well, you shoot less of them because you're trying to take good shots. But when you have someone like Asia Wilson that can operate so well back to the basket, can operate so well in space,
Hmm.
if you're not spreading the defense out, you take away so much of her advantage because, as incredible as she is, if you're regularly able to send help, let alone two helpers on top of her defender, that's going to be tough to get through when that's on basically every shot you take. And so that's something we've seen for her for years. Teams have been trying to stop her in that way. But the difference is she used to have more of an ability to kick it back out, to reset things, to have other people able to shoot and create some space. But now that's mostly okay. If she's kicking it out, they're then looking to drive again, which means they're driving right back into the help defense. And so, I mean, they cannot create enough of an advantage on the offensive end beyond the advantage you get just by virtue of having Asia Wilson on the floor. Beyond that, they're not really doing a whole lot on top of it. And so I mean, again, they have the ability to put it all together. They have such tremendous scores. They have players that have been great shooters at points in their careers. And so on any given night, they have the ability to really put it together. Like they 100% could go out there and beat the Lynx. Like that's no doubt in my mind. But are they going to go on a tear over the last 20 games of the season and win 18 of those? I feel very confident in saying that is not the case. And so from there, it's just okay. Where do you land? Do you, first of all, do you make the playoffs? And then
Yeah.
beyond that, who would your matchup be? Because right now, making the playoffs is not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, I mean, the biggest thing facing this team right now is, are they going to win enough games to make the playoffs? When you have teams chasing you that are playing, really well in the Valkyries, even the Sparks. I
Mhm.
mean, I think the Sparks are, again, like I said, they have the up arrow. Now, their big litmus test will be tomorrow against the Liberty. I think that is a big game. I'm 90% sure that's, yeah, tomorrow. So for me, that'll be, kind of a gauge. But like you said, adding Cameron Brink back for the Sparks and just their momentum. It's last night was their fourth straight game scoring 90 plus. I mean, they're shooting the ball well, they're moving the ball well. They have so many weapons. So when you have teams chasing you like that, I mean, and even you can't discount the Mystics. They played well. I think,
Oh,
relying on some rookies is a little bit, will be interesting down this stretch run. But I think again, they've played enough basketball to be in a position to understand, kind of what they need to do. So to me, I mean that the Aces, that's not a, sure thing. So And what we say is just the consistency. It's like, sure, you could go out tonight and beat the Lynx and look great. And to me, I don't think those things happen unless Asia is just really, really good. And
Mhm.
for them, I just think it's not likely that she can go out and get 30 every night and then somehow the supporting cast finds enough. Now, she's again playing at an MVP level, but I just don't think she gets enough consistently on a nightly basis to put them in a position where, I don't know. I think the playoffs are a big, big question mark for them.
Well, especially as we discussed with the Fever and their matchup with the Aces, a lot of it comes down to how have you performed against the teams around you. And so, frankly, when you're looking at this back to back for Vegas, if you could have said to them coming into it, you could only win one of these games, I can basically guarantee they would have said, we want to beat the Fever because that's a
Mhm.
team that's closer to you in the standings. Instead, they lost, and now they have lost the season series to the Fever. They're down 2-1 there. So they can't secure a win over them. I'm fact checking myself on
Yeah.
whether they play again. No, so it was 3 games over the course of the season, and so that's going Indiana's way. And then when you look at the other teams that are around them, Washington, they're 1-2 against Washington.
Mhm.
I mean, that is very, very likely going to matter. You have a loss against LA. And so none of these teams that are around them, LA, Vegas hasn't set themselves apart from any of them. And so they're at the very best on a level playing field. More often than not, they're going to be having to fight past these teams in a similar spot in the standings. Golden State, they've split with. So they are gonna have to stack up wins somehow, and even then, it may not be enough because of these series results, and so it'll be very interesting, especially because of the amount of games they have in a short period of time where they
Mhm.
go, they play the 22nd, 24th, 25th, 27th, 29th, like, and then that's not the end of the gauntlet. I mean, they don't have more than 3 days off
Yep.
for the rest
Really, I
of
think the
the
rest of the season.
season till
Mhm.
they play Atlanta on August 27th, and then they don't play Minnesota until September 4th.
Yep.
That's crazy. So, you're already, you know, going through what you've been going through, and now guess what? You do not get a chance to breathe. So, either this is very much sink or swim
Yeah,
right now.
absolutely, and you're looking they also only have 1 game against the Sun left. So,
Mhm,
you have games against the Sky and the Wings who are playing better. I mean, Sky with Angel Reese are a completely different team, and, if Adkins and, some of those other players are back, that's gonna help them because I do think they're a different team when they're
mhm.
all together and playing
And a
well, and
team
so
that Vegas hasn't seen yet at all, so you can't even
yep.
make, like, those adjustments really.
Yeah, absolutely, and so, the schedule isn't necessarily favorable for them either in terms of, oh, you have a bunch of games against, the bottom 3 teams in the league because those games, outside of the Sun being, 3 and 20, the other 2 teams, the Wings and the Sky, are certainly at points playing better and can go out and beat teams. So,
Mhm.
I just it's a very interesting landscape for the Aces here over the next, month and a half.
It is. It definitely is, and one of those teams you mentioned, the Wings, they're playing at the Valkyries tonight, which, as we said about today's slate, just very, very good games.
Mhm.
I am really excited about what we have ahead of us tonight. And man, first of all, my secondary team in the Valkyries, I am so excited to get to see Ileana Repair. I don't know, I haven't seen yet on if she's been officially
Mhm.
declared active for tonight. I hope
I
so.
haven't seen I haven't seen
Uh,
anything either, so
but I get a lot of emails since I got
mhm.
put on our WNBA, email list. So,
It became big time.
thank you, Aaron, for that. I appreciate it, but oh my gosh, I still am working on sifting through it. So, uh, if it's already out there, forgive us. But I
Mm,
hope that we get to see Ileana Repair sooner rather than later. Probably very soon because they announced her a while back, so it probably won't be real long. But man, she is going to really add a whole lot for them. I'm super super excited to see that. Um, I'm also just seeing. I want to touch on this really quick
mhm,
because the way I organize my tabs, I block our in show chat, and so I should probably amend that. But
mm.
BMAC told us earlier in the episode the Fever signed Chloe Bibby to a 7-day contract.
I like that.
I love that.
Mhm,
I love that move so much. I've been shocked that since her prior hardship contract was done with the Valkyries, that
mhm,
no one had signed Chloe Baby. I thought the Aces really should have been giving her a look. However, with Megan Gustafson coming back, they're a very similar type of player.
mhm,
So knowing what her timeline was, it does make a little bit more sense. But a big that can stretch the floor, that can run, that's going to defend, that's going to rebound. I love this move. I'm shocked. This was not on my radar, but I'm like blown away. I think that this is such a great move. This is going to be really, really fun to see because I loved watching Chloe Bibby in her minutes with the Valkyries. So I wanted to make sure that we hit that because that's one of my favorite hardship signings. Gotta say, Beaver kind of knocking it out of the park on these hardship signings because when you got Ari McDonald early in the season, kind of recalibrated stuff. We're able to
yep.
get her signed. Huge game changer. Bring in Chloe Bibby. That's going to do something for you.
Yeah, I love that move for the Fever too. Like you said, her minute, her 7-day with the Valkyries earlier this season, I thought she was really good and surprised no one kind of picked her up until now. But love what she brings to the Fever and the way that they play. She fits perfectly for that because she can get out and run. She can shoot the three, like you said, rebound, get to the rim. So for me, that's a big ad for the Fever. So I'm excited to see kind of how she fits in there.
And I guess I do now remember that Chloe Bibby did play for Australia in the Asia basket. And so I'm curious if maybe she had already committed to Australia there. And so if anyone was interested, she was just kind of saying, hey, I'm
Hmm.
not able to. I'm playing with my national team. And so that just finished. And Indiana must have been on her line. So that'll be really exciting. I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. And then BMAC has fact checked us. Thank you. I appreciate you. Ileana Repair was at practice yesterday and was activated back on the 17th. So seems like a pretty decent chance
Yeah.
we see her tonight against the Wings, which is very exciting. Also, because I think
Hmm.
there's some really great matchups with Repair there, as far as kind of those veteran versus not so veteran versus rookie
Hmm.
versus very young. I think that she and Louisa Geiselsuter have some similarities in the way that they play in the post, and both having that kind of international flavor to their game where
Yeah.
they have that versatility. They do a little bit of everything. They have that length, but they'll stretch the floor some. I think that's going to be a really really fun kind of one-on-one matchup potentially. And then across the board, a team in Dallas that has finally started to look like they have some stuff figured out. I know we've said that before. I know
Hmm.
it's not always going to stick, but we've seen more competent games at
Yes.
the very least. We've seen more overall contributions outside of one person goes off. Like when you have Arike having solid games, when you're getting her consistently involved, when you have I think some things figured out in your rotation between Liuru, Louisa Geiselsuter, and you've got Tierra McCowan whose minutes have dropped some, but regardless, I mean you have that especially between Lee and Louisa, a lot of versatility. You can stretch out to the three.
Hmm.
Lee, I did not know that you had that consistency in your bag. Like the free throw shooting should have been an indication, but
Hmm.
who knew? I love it. But yeah, this is gonna be, I think, a really fun one. And obviously everything in Valhalla is a really fun environment to watch.
Yeah, and I think the Wings having a game under their belt after the All-Star game is a big thing. I think you've seen a little bit from teams just that little rust after having the break.
Hmm.
Obviously, it was welcomed by everyone, but it does take a little bit of time then to get back into the flow, get back into that game rhythm. But I think the great thing, about the Wings being to that point where they're getting a little bit more consistent, you always have a consistent scorer and player in Paige Beckers. And then
Hmm.
now when you're finding those other players like Enrique, Lee, Luisa that are, providing some consistent scoring as well. And then you have still Isaiah James, JJ Quinterly, still being their rookie season, but again, getting those extended minutes, really finding their footing. I think that's why you're seeing a little bit more of what you said, competence out of the Wings, because you're getting, a more consistent product. When you're playing rookies in minutes that they, have never really been exposed to without a lot of veteran leadership out there, you're going to have those ups and downs. But now when you're getting healthy, you're kind of seeing that consistency come out, and the product is certainly better. But that game I think will be really fun. Obviously, like you said, every game at Valhalla is fun. The environment is just great to watch. So certainly excited to kind of see if the Wings can build on what they did at the Storm the other night, and then how the Valkyries come out after the break.
And especially for Dallas, they have to be looking at this as a massive opportunity, given that the all-star from the Valkyries and Kayla Thornton
Is
is
out.
out, and
Yep.
so that's gonna be, another really big shift for them where you're coming back from the break and kinda the cornerstone of your team is out. Obviously, they've adjusted as well as any team, probably better than anyone at figuring out what things look
Mhm.
like with different players in there, but that's a pretty big one. So, definitely a crazy slate tonight. I'm super excited. This weekend's going to be super fun. Just we got treated to a good bit of good matchups here coming out of the break. And really there's not a lot of bad ones in the league this year
Nope.
as we've said pretty consistently. So, definitely in for a treat on the back half of the season as we start to sort of figure out, okay, where are things landing? How are things playing out? Might start getting some answers as far as potential playoff scenarios. And we've got some time before that though. Plenty of time before that and plenty of big moves, I guess. Man, I haven't been so excited to watch the Fever all year. I'm a big Chloe Bibby fan. This is
I
great.
like it. I like it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Thanks as always to Brittany for joining me on this Friday morning. Folks, if you want to find us online, you can find me at JSteyz, JSTEYZ. Brittany is at Brittany Carper. And of course, make sure that you're following her hoop stats on whatever social platforms you're on. They're just at her hoop stats. As easy as that. We've got a whole bunch of written content out there for you. So make sure you are subscribed to our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review wherever you are listening right now, whether that be YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, insert whatever other platform I'm unaware of here. Really, really helps us out if you share, if you rate, all that. So thank you so much for tuning in to another full week that included the 50th episode of this iteration of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. And we will be back at you next week.